Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today I want to talk about some of the positive data that is coming out of the city of Baltimore, because homicide is significantly down, some other crimes are up, and even though the headlines will tell you that Baltimore is #1 in homicide in the nation again, the fact of the matter is, the drop has been significant, so even though they're #1, they didn't rise to that point, they're just falling, but some other places fell a little bit more, thus putting them at the top slot. Now, we're going to break this down. I'm going to tell you my theory on why this is happening. I'm also going to make fun of some lefties who just don't understand criminal justice or anything of the sort. It's going to be a fun time, but before we get into that, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
So the headline of this Fox 45 Baltimore segment is as follows. Baltimore named the deadliest city in the United States, and the fact of the matter is, that is just true. It is factual. But, again, as I said in the open, that title is a bit deceptive when you actually look at the numbers. Now, they trot out their very young-looking mayor, the boy king himself, to say everybody matters to him, and he's very concerned about it, and this is him trying to answer for the fact that Baltimore is the worst city in terms of homicide in the United States of America, but again, it was actually significantly worse last year. However, there were other places that were even worse than that were ahead of them, like Memphis, so they didn't get there by becoming worse than Memphis, they got there by improving at a slower rate than Memphis.
For Mayor Brandon Scott.
Every single body, every single person, individual in the city of Baltimore, lives matters to me.
He says the safety of the residents of Baltimore is a top priority.
I don't care who you are in the city of Baltimore. We care about you and don't want you to be a victim of violence.
Earlier this month, the mayor praising a reduction in the numbers. Homicides down 28% from this time last year. Non-fatal shootings 39%, and violent crime 8%.
Now look, Baltimore obviously and undoubtedly is still a very dangerous place compared to other places in the United States of America, but the fact of the matter is 28% reduction in homicide, 39% reduction in non-fatal shootings, overall reduction of 8% in violent crime are all good things, they are all real things, and this is why it's very important, and I'll often do this on this channel, to compare Baltimore to Baltimore, much in the same way that I compare New York to New York, not to other cities.
Despite the local numbers, nationally, the city is making headlines for having the highest per capita murder rate. According to safehome.org, Baltimore leads the nation in cities with 500,000 people or more, surpassing Memphis, Tennessee, which ranked the deadliest city last year, and Detroit, Michigan, the previous 2 years.
Officers located multiple victims as well as multiple firearms on the scene.
That realization came to the forefront during the city's latest mass shooting a week ago.
At this time, we have 8 confirmed victims. 1 individual was pronounced deceased.
Now, I left this particular section in because I do want to point out that although we hear about a certain type of mass shooting with a certain type of mass shooter profile, the fact of the matter is these are very common, and in fact, the most common in areas like Baltimore, in inner cities. They just never seem to get national media attention, and this is likely due to the fact that the national media has no interest at all whatsoever in highlighting black-on-black crime and the failures of democratically run cities. So again, it's still pretty bad, and by the way, it's pretty bad in other categories compared to other parts of the country.
And it's not just homicides that Baltimore leads the nation in, according to safehome.org.
We have an armed robbery. Reported he was walking when a male drove up to him and got out of the passenger side with a gun, asking for his phone and wallet.
It's also leading in overall robberies, a problem acknowledged by Commissioner Worley.
Our street robberies are up because our young people have figured out if they steal a car and do a street robbery, they can do multiple ones.
According to the latest BPD data, as of last week, robberies citywide are up 6% year to date, with over 2,000 so far this year.
And of course, we have the robbery numbers, which are in fact up, and this, like the officer said, is due to the fact that these people are stealing cars, committing multiple robberies, and it is absolute madness in terms of that category of crime in Baltimore. But let's go to the explanations offered by people for why crime is down in the city of Baltimore, because we have an article that corresponds with this particular news piece that makes a bunch of different claims on why that might be the case. Now, this is from July of this year, which said that 106 people were murdered in 2024 in Baltimore. The city is on pace to see less than 300 murders, which is something that they saw last year, and optimistic reporting is saying that they could actually see less than 200 murders, which is absolutely great. Now, Mayor Brandon Scott credits the city's group violence reduction strategy for the drop in homicides. He says, quote, "The residents of Baltimore should understand this program works, and it's why we are having a historic reduction in homicides in Baltimore, period. Right now, almost every major city is seeing reductions in homicides this year, leaving some questions on whether or not GVRS can really take the credit. Quote, "We were up so high during the pandemic that there was no place to go but down," Dr. Christopher Herman said. Now, you guys know I have had debates, conversations, discussions on the crime increase, and a lot of times the lefties always try to hide behind the pandemic as the be-all, end-all reason for why crime actually spiked. In fact, there was a Majority Report segment that was so bad, so stupid, so horrific, that I actually had to make a two-part response to it, one discussing crime, the other discussing their pro-squatting attitude, because yes, those people are actually out there and they exist. And in that video, they got angry at me and they decided that they were going to make fun of me for saying the George Floyd effect by citing a headline from an NBC News article.
New FBI data confirms previous indications that crime in the U.S. declined significantly in 2023, continuing a post-pandemic trend.
And just to reference, sorry to cut you off, but just to reference our buddy, the actual Justice Warrior, it doesn't say the post-George Floyd effect trend. It says the post-pandemic trend.
Right.
So like it's fucking embarrassing, frankly. And I'll just say it. Anna retweets that guy. It's fucking embarrassing.
Now, forget about the fact that they just used a headline to address points that I brought up about data, but that article actually ended up saying that a police shortage was probably one of the biggest driving factors in the crime increase, and of course, the absence of the courts, and that's what they meant when they were pinning it on the pandemic, which again could easily be attributed to Black Lives Matter in terms of the police shortage. But Baltimore, to me, is a much easier place to make this case, because guess what? Everything you just heard about the crime spike and how it got so bad during the pandemic in the city of Baltimore is absolutely false. It's not true. In fact, in 2020, Baltimore saw a slight decrease in homicides compared to 2019. And if you look at the broader picture, what you find out is that their crime spike actually started in 2015. That's when you saw the major jump in homicides, and concluded in 2022. Now, you guys might be saying, well, Sean, you can't blame the George Floyd effect for a crime spike that started in 2015. George Floyd died in 2020, so I guess you have no argument. And I guess you could make that case if you were a dumb idiot who doesn't know anything about the history of Baltimore, because their Black Lives Matter effect actually occurred in 2015 with the death of Freddie Gray. And if you'll recall, a new up-and-coming woke district attorney had just taken office called Marylin Mosby, and she said that she wanted to give the rioters room to destroy.
Well, we've had these types of conversations before, and I've made it very clear that I worked with the police and instructed them to do everything that they could to make sure that the protesters were able to exercise their right to free speech. It's a very delicate balancing act, because while we tried to make sure that they were protected from the cars and the other things that were going on, we also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well.
Hey guys, Editing Sean here, and if you didn't notice, this is actually the former mayor of Baltimore, not the former Baltimore State's attorney, Marylin Mosby. I shoot these videos from memory, and sometimes I mix up quotes and whatnot from officials that are located in the same area. But as we all know, according to my critics on the internet.com, if I mix up a quote and misattribute it on the fly, that is the worst, most sinister lie of all time, so I guess I'm sorry. But what Marylin Mosby did in relation to this case was bring charges against the cops that everybody knew weren't going to result in convictions and were politically motivated.
The findings of our comprehensive, thorough, and independent investigation, coupled with the medical examiner's determination that Mr. Gray's death was a homicide, which we received today, has led us to believe that we have probable cause to file criminal charges. To those that are angry, hurt, or have their own experiences of injustice at the hands of police officers. I urge you to channel the energy peacefully as we prosecute this case.
She then proceeded to lose all of those cases because obviously she was going to lose the cases and have the charges tossed out because they were ridiculous and absurd.
After the acquittals of Lieutenant Brian Rice, officers Caesar Goodson, Edward Nero, and the mistrial of William Porter, State's Attorney Marylin Mosby is facing growing pressure to drop charges in the remaining cases.
You shouldn't be forging ahead to make a point, to send a message. That's not the basis of a prosecution. That's an abuse of prosecutorial discretion, and prosecutors have a great deal of power.
And it's not just Mosby under fire. Her prosecutors Michael Schatzow and Jan Bledsoe face new complaints to a Maryland commission saying they should be disbarred. A George Washington University law professor already made a similar complaint against Mosby, and 5 of the 6 officers charged have filed suit against her because of her prosecutions in this case.
And then, of course, she decided that she was going to play victim and say, oh my God, the evil white racist system. So again, politicians that have similar beliefs mix up their statements.
However, after much thought and prayer, it has become clear to me that without being able to work with an independent investigatory agency from the very start, without having a say in the election of whether our cases proceed in front of a judge or a jury, without communal oversight of policing in this community, without real substantive reforms to the current criminal justice system, we could try this case 100 times and cases just like it, and we would still end up with the same result. Accordingly, I have decided not to proceed on the cases against Officer Garrett, Sergeant Alicia White, or to relitigate the case against William Porter.
Now, unlike most prosecutors, Marylin Mosby didn't run on prosecuting criminals. She actually ran on getting criminals out of prison. And if you remember my Adnan Syed videos, you'll know that she set up a conviction integrity unit, installed a public defender called Becky Feldman in said unit, and they would go through convictions, try to poke holes in cases in order to release criminals, and very notably, they used this tactic to fraudulently release Adnan Syed, who 100% killed Hae-Min Lee. Again, check out my videos on that. And it just so happens that Marylin Mosby, this woke prosecutor with this horrible ideology, took office in January of 2015. So right when the homicide spike happened, Marylin Mosby was the one sworn into office as the state's attorney for Baltimore. Now again, you might be asking yourself, Sean, okay, fine, she took office right around the time that crime spiked, and she ran on not prosecuting anyone for anything, and she didn't want to prosecute any youthful offenders, and she wasn't charging people who committed crimes with guns with serious charges. She was letting them go, so eventually they would get out and murder people. But the fact of the matter is, your Marylin Mosby explanation has no applicability to the drop in homicide that we saw in 2023. And if you said that, anonymous made-up person that I just threw out there to strawman the counter argument, you'd be dead wrong, because guess what? Marylin Mosby was indicted for corruption. She lost her primary in 2022, and then in 2023, in January, a new district attorney called Ivan Bates actually took office. Now, to be fair, I actually criticized Ivan Bates because in the documentaries about Adnan Syed, he was the candidate running as a softer prosecutor, and he promised to get Adnan out of prison as a campaign promise in order to win re-election. So in that particular primary campaign, he was actually significantly worse than Mosby, but that's the one that Mosby actually won. Fast forward to 2022 though, and Ivan Bates is singing a completely different tune. He's running on actually prosecuting people. I think he discovered in that period of time that the district attorney is not supposed to be an extra defense attorney, not supposed to be an extra public defender, but he's actually supposed to engage in prosecutions. So when he came into office, one of the first things that he did, and I know you guys might find this shocking from a Democrat in Baltimore, but it was to actually do his job. It was to actually prosecute people. In fact, Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates and his office have taken a no-nonsense approach on crime, which is a complete change or 180 from the mentality of the previous administration. Quote, so there is a real correlation between my office coming in and putting trigger pullers in jail and seeing a dramatic drop, Bates said. Bates' partnership with the U.S. Attorney for Maryland, Eric Barron, many say is also making the difference. Quote, it's very easy for the mayor who's in a political bubble and not in and out of courtrooms and not in and out of jail and the street to think that his policies are working. But the bottom line is the prosecution of gun cases and the incarceration of illegal gun offenders on the federal side, that's what's making all the difference, Jeremy Eldridge said. Now for me, the proof in the pudding is in the taste, and in the city of Baltimore, when you pull a gun, when you pull that trigger in the commission of a crime, you are going to get charged, you are going to get sentenced, you are going to get sent to jail. And Ivan Bates, a complete 180 from his campaign previously and from Marylin Mosby, who again installed a ridiculous activist, a public defender, to get people out of jail and always ran on how many people she freed that were criminals, to Ivan Bates partnering with a U.S. attorney to make sure that if he can't nail them on state charges, that these people will get nailed on federal charges. And no one should be surprised when a prosecutor pledges that criminals that use guns in the commission of felonies should be sent to prison for that they don't go on to later use those guns in a commission of a murder. This is the most obvious thing you could possibly imagine. This is the most sensible policy that you could put out there. And again, the numbers are undeniable. Just look at the data for yourself. Woke prosecutor comes in 2015. Marylin Mosby runs on getting as many people out of prison as possible, cheers on the Black Lives Matter riots that are tearing up her city. She stays in office until the end of 2022, but as soon as the clock hits 2023, all of a sudden this very stable pandemic resistant rise in homicides that we saw throughout her whole tenure turns around, goes in the complete other direction. When he decides to actually go after the criminal rather than pretend they're Aladdin, crime drops dramatically. Look, Baltimore is still bad. Baltimore still has its problems. Undoubtedly so. I'm not pretending everything is A-okay and it's a first-class place to live in the United States of America. But the fact of the matter is, you can do things to make places like Baltimore better, and those things don't involve catering to the criminal, obsessing about diversion programs that never punish the criminal, because we've seen that movie before. They had 8 years of that experiment, and look at what it brought them. Look at the horrors that were inflicted, all because Marylin Mosby was more concerned about protecting the criminal than the average everyday citizen. And when you get a normal Democrat prosecutor in office, there's a huge difference. It's absolutely startling. It's amazing. Now look, I'm going to link the sources in the description of the video so you could check it out for yourself, but I really do want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Am I just totally wrong? Is the data just evil white racism that is designed crookedly to debunk the pandemic hypothesis? Or do we see a pretty strong correlation with Black Lives Matter incidents, Black Lives Matter politicians coming into office, and a rise in crime, specifically black crime? Again, all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like. Subscribe for more content. Follow me on the social media. Support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the drop in crime in Baltimore. Till next time.